Welcome everyone to the next Beyond the Summit series, Real World Sustainability for Events and Venues of all sizes, joined by C's partner and great colleagues, Closed Loop. So this is a really exciting session that we've had on the cards for a while, and through our partnership, we're really trying to make sure that we connect the dots between the event side of sport, but also we know the crossover as it relates to local, large events and across the board. So really pleased to join Sam and Brian today for today's session. And I'd also like to do a brief acknowledgement of country and share my acknowledgements to the lands in which you dial into this webinar today. And personally, I'd like to acknowledge the importance of culture, nature and biodiversity and how it plays into the world of sport and climate. What I'll do next, I will do a quick brief intro of Sam and Brian, just so you know who they are and who's talking, and then I'll throw over to you. So Sam Cooper is the New Zealand National Manager at Closed Loop Environmental Solutions, and he leads the waste sustainability initiatives across the events New Zealand wide. So absolutely great to get a New Zealand perspective. And C isn't just Australia, it's Pacific as well. So it's fantastic to have a New Zealand lens on the phone today. And Brian is the New South Wales ACT State and Territory Manager for Site Services. So leading the team that provide the sustainable waste and cleaning operations across major venues, events in New South Wales, and supporting large-scale events nationwide within the team. So what we'll do now, we'll sit back, we'll enjoy. We can have questions and discussion at the end, so feel free to put any discussion in the chat as you go along. And then we'll recap at the end to close, have a quick chat, and yeah, hopefully you get a bit from this session. So over to you, Sam.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Kia ora, everyone. Sam Cooper from Closed Loop New Zealand. And this is my colleague, Brian. We're here today to talk about real-world sustainability for events and venues of all sizes. And it's pretty broad, which is how we like it. And there'll be some stuff in here that will prompt some questions, some thought. Some of it will be relatable to you, some of it may not. So take what you want and leave what you don't need. And firstly, I just want to acknowledge that Closed Loop acknowledges and pays respect to the past, present and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation and the continuation of cultural, spiritual and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So cracking into it, we have a few principles and ideas here at Closed Loop, and particularly in the site services team. And one of these is waste as a resource, and that basically is treating the waste as a resource and not rubbish. And the next thing is controlling the inputs to manage the outputs. So what this means is we always want to manage and control inputs at events and venues, so we know what we're dealing with at the end, which is the output. And the other one is waste doesn't disappear. It requires design, planning, and action from the start. So all of this really means that we want to design waste out from the start. And next one, I'll hand over to Brian.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just another little bit of background on what we're going to talk about. We're going to give you some very specific examples on things that may not be directly relevant to something that you're thinking about working in or directly to what you particularly are involved in. The real intention of this meeting is basically to give some food for thought and then have some questions and some proper conversation afterwards. So I just want to start off that I'm going to dive straight into a really specific example for a very specific type of sporting event. And I really want to give that as an example, but show that it can possibly be extended out elsewhere and applied in different ways. So the first example is a simple switch, which starts with the need for hydration at mass participation sporting events. So this is at aid stations and at the finish lines. There's often this demand from athletes to be served water, maybe some electrolytes, potentially some food and other things to keep them going through the marathon or whatever it is that they're taking part in. We've worked at a lot of these across the country, and there's a unique challenge in this, in that you often get quite a hodgepodge of waste given out. So you get cups or you get bottles given out, you get people being given bananas or snacks or whatever it is. And downstream from the aid station, it normally ends up being a pile of mixed waste, often on the ground or in bins, and it's all highly contaminated. And in our experience, it's often all destined for landfill. So what do we do about this? We need to figure out what makes up that waste and how we can try and save it. So the first initial step in that is introducing Simply Cups into that, which is the closed loop coffee cup or paper cup recycling program, which turns paper cups into a valuable additive into lightweight concrete, lots of building materials, and also roading. So it literally turns it into a material that is commercially viable for a company that wants to build these things to buy and use as a material. So switching those cups over from PLA or from using bottles immediately means that a vast majority of that waste is then recycled. It's also tolerant to a level of contamination, which means that if you do get some gel packs and some other little bits of plastic that get mixed in there, it doesn't mean that the whole thing ends up in landfill. It means that you're literally pretty much all of that waste going to landfill to 100% of the waste downstream from the aid station going to a new purpose. So yeah, that's a little bit of an outline of the Simply Cups process. Also, because you're if you use something like a plastic-free paper cup or something with a PLA lining, you're not using any virgin plastic in that process at all. And then because it's creating a material that's useful on the other end, you're eliminating the need for the manufacturer or the company that's making this material using virgin materials in roads also. So it's got two benefits. The next slide is a little bit of a dive into how that looks in practice. And again, I really want to show how this solution can be implemented at all levels of events. So this solution might not be relevant to your event, but another solution that we talk about later, I just really want to show that any solution that we have, it can be scaled up and down. So on the left, you see we've got a very small community fun run. There were maybe only a couple of these bins at the finish line, maybe only filled up 4 or 5 of these bags through the course of the whole thing, not many cups. But it's the same setup as we move from that small community fun run of 2,000 people to a marathon event with 15, maybe 20,000 people, where we're just spreading out those bins. We're thinking about, as people come past that aid station, when are they going to be wanting to get rid of that cup? Before it ends up on the ground, let's put a bin there and capture it before it ends up just in the ground and getting stamped into the ground and turning into mush. And then we go across to the right to a major mass participation event where it's just increasing the size of those bins, increasing how long they're there for to deal with the amount that's going in. But it's the exact same solution across the whole thing. And that's the key message here is solutions that huge events with 80,000 to 100,000 people taking part in are relevant to community events with a couple thousand people. And solutions that you're using at these small community events are also scalable to 100,000 people, massive participation events. So that's the message in this one. I'll pass back to Sam for the next.
Yeah, it's great. And when Brian and I were talking before about the setup here, it translates as well for Brian's talked about swapping over to paper cups and implementing these bins to be recycled with Simply Cups, but it can also be for the likes of reusables. It's the same setup and same operations, but instead of it being the single-use paper cups, it can be a reusable. So if that is something that you can pick up and take away into your practice, that's really fantastic.
Yeah, can I just add, I meant to say that reusables were initially a challenge for this sort of event because they often end up on the ground and broken. But designing a good way of collecting them can actually fix that. So potentially this is the solution to that.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next slide is another simple switch. I like to break it down into 3 things. So first one, picking easy to manage materials. So something that's simple to separate and recover. If it's tricky to sort at speed, it's likely going to contaminate bins. And here we want to be prioritizing value materials. Let's think about cans and other things that could potentially go to the CDS. Next one is making a simple switch. Use reusables when needed. Give the can out to the participants or the people that are coming up. Don't decant it into a single-use cup. like Brian mentioned, swap out your water at aid station for paper cups and utilize Simply Cups, which is operational in Australia. At Sydney Half Marathon, Wallaby Water came on board and provided canned water for attendees at the finish line instead of providing cups or bottles. You can see there a photo. We had a particular setup for those cans, really easily signpost with our staff at them. But also, you need to make it simple for your attendees and limit the variety of products that you're actually giving out. And if you do limit these, it also makes it easy for the attendees to dispose of because they know where it goes because there's so few products on site to deal with. And the last one, buy what has a home. So only choose products with a clear path for recovery. Add a CDS bin or a recovery collection point where possible, and choose products like cans for beer or canned water. Switching to paper cups and implementing Simply Cups, like Brian said, at aid stations and water cups, and where possible, implement a reuse system like Better Cup. Moving on to the next one, it's an analogy that I took a while to explain my thoughts and feelings on it to Brian, but it's the iceberg analogy and what's above the line and below the line. And I really like this because when you look at an iceberg, everything above the line is pretty, it's small, it's compact, it's what you can see, but below is this big beast that's holding everything together and up. So on this visual, you can see things like above the line bins and signage and educators or waste ambassadors and social media and the output of what you're doing sustainably within your venue, business, or event. And below the line, and look, this is just a couple of things that we hit on often, but things like contractor and supplier guides, vendor packaging frameworks, showcasing what vendors can and can't use in terms of the food and beverage packaging, bin placement maps, waste infrastructure, staff training and SOPs, and the ones that we all love is waste sorting and waste data, because we all need that baseline of waste data to make decisions. And really, like everything that we're talking about here has links back to this iceberg analogy. Everything that's above the line looks and works fantastically only if below the line is working and has had some really thorough thought. But also, if you're doing everything below the line, but you're not actually showcasing this or doing it well above the line, your attendees and those who interact with your product, they're just not going to know what you're doing. And really, you want to be telling that message and telling that story well. I'm going to hand it over back to Brian for the next slide. Here we go.
Yeah, so I want to go back into some specific examples. So really talking about where we've started from, where we're talking about the controlling the inputs, we've really got to think about the ways that people interact with waste on site. So thinking about if people are going to be in a bar area, what are they going to be consuming there? They're going to be consuming can and bottles. If it's a food area, it's going to be food, whatever it is. So if we go from left to right, the left-hand side picture gives a really good idea of the opportunity that we've got in a venue, in a permanent space, to build something that really shares the message of the sustainability of the venue itself. So you've got these really big visual piece, you've got a lot of text on it, you're really able to show off what's happening in the venue and what efforts the venue is actually going to about sustainability. It's also bringing people along on that journey and encouraging them to participate because it's so visual and something they can actually interact with. Going to the second from the left is downstream from a finish line aid station at one of these mass participation events. So same as I spoke about before, little bit of thought going in there. You're imagining someone finishing up their race. They're getting some food, probably a banana or an apple or something, and they're getting a cup of water. They're going to want to drink that first, get rid of that cup into that first bin. And then as they dissipate into the rest of the venue, we've got a green food waste bin there to try and capture the apple and banana or whatever it is, as they want to get rid of that. So really thinking about that flow of people and the waste that they've got in that moment and having a bin there for them to get rid of it into the right place. Moving across to the right and up is the red, yellow, and purple bins. That's a bit of a beer garden bar area. So lots of cans and bottles happening. Gives them that opportunity to separate at the source there. And also on the purple bin gives it a really good way to share the messaging. So for that event in particular, the money would have been donated to a local charity, and there would be signage in that purple bin saying, hey, give us your bottles and cans, and all this money gets donated to X, Y, and Z charity. The top right is a little bit of an example of bins when you don't want bins, because that's often a movement in the events and venues world. Is bins aren't things that you really want to look at too much, and you don't want them to be too in your face, especially in VIP zones, and maybe if you start going inside. So still providing that recycling and landfill option and letting people self-sort, but hiding it away in a more kind of bespoke and kind of VIP looking type of style. The same sort of thing goes for the bottom right, which is in an interior space where you don't want these big overbearing bins, but you still want the separation of waste. It's probably low volumes of waste, doesn't need to be checked as much, but it's still so much better to have that separation at source and that visual story for people to see that stuff is being separated, rather than trying to hide it in one little black bin in the corner and then everything just getting mixed together and ending up in landfill.
Yeah,
I'll give back to Sam for going back of house.
Yeah, and I really love this, Brian, because it, again, like I said before, it links back to that iceberg. You know, there's real thought about the different areas in the event where the bin placements are, but you know, like that bin station on the left at Sydney Motorsport Park, it's really an outworking of above the line. It's looking fantastic, you know, and it's something that the attendees can interact with. Moving on to another version of not everyone interacts the same, and this time we look at back of house. You know, let's think about vendors, from food vendors, coffee to beverage, back of house areas, the bars, your contractors and your crew. You know, you want those people to also be thought about. It's different from the way that the front of house interacts, like Brian's just showed you. There's different waste streams that may be available, and you don't want that waste to go into your front of house bins and contaminate it. So here you can see we've got a couple of waste compounds set up to small events on the left, where we've got our staff sorting waste into clear bins, and making sure that the waste that could be contaminated is separated into those streams. You know, some flowers collection or garden waste, you know, you want to have clear bins for those in areas. And you know, you may have people that are doing oil waste or waste oil or cardboard or glass or more food scraps back of house. So you want to make sure that there's thought around who's on site that you're bringing in, how they're going to interact with everything, and making sure that it is bespoke for them, because yeah, coming back to it, not everyone interacts the same way. Now I'd like to put attention to one of my favorite projects that I've worked on, and the thought of, you know, what you don't know can cost you. So at this particular venue, there was a few challenges. They were creating double the amount of waste. Sponsors lost visibility and no real tracking and baseline. So if I go into more detail about what these challenges were, so basically, to make things really simple and easy front of house for the attendees at the venue, they decanted everything there, if it was from cans or glass or anything, into single-use cups, compostable cups, to solve the front of house issue of having one bin there that every attendee can put whatever product it is that they buy into the one bin. It's all going to be compostable. I think the lovely thing in New Zealand versus Australia is we've got a few more composting options and it's a little bit looser, but you know, we have the same struggles and we adopt a lot of the stuff that pulls back from Australia. So what they were doing, they were decanting the cans into single-use cups that they were purchasing. So right there, you can tell and you can make an easy assumption that they're creating double the amount of waste. And because of that, and the cans were getting decanted into single-use cups, the sponsors and their brands got limited visibility in the consumer hands, and they weren't so happy about it. And again, like I said, there was no tracking, which meant no visibility. And the same goes for having no reporting, which leaves you with no baseline. So what the solution was is we came in and said, hey, look, what if you looked at it and said, let's open up a can, let's give the can over to the customer, and they can go and enjoy this product in their hand. And all of a sudden, we've not purchased a single-use cup, and we've given the sponsor's product into their hands, which is creating ROI back to that sponsor. The issue here is that, yes, there was mixed waste front of house and there was multiple bins in there, which is where Closed Loop came in. We provided some waste auditing. We sort all the waste at this venue at every event, and we're able to provide them with really detailed reporting, which involves cans, plastics, glass, cardboard, plastic film, and compost and food waste. And the outcomes for them was cost savings on collections. And by this, I mean, there might have been 36, 60 bins that came out of the venue. We sorted it and condensed it down to, let's say, 15 bins. So all of a sudden, there's a tangible saving to that of 15 bins that aren't get flipped. And when you times that by how many events are a year at the venue, the savings are pretty apparent. Next outcome was the sponsor was getting their visibility back and the product in hand, which was fantastic for them. And it also provided the venue with a benchmark for the future for their own venues and projects, but also for other venues around them. They could say, hey, look, these guys have actually done something great. And, you know, that's what I like to say is it's getting back to the basics is a sure way to win. So, yeah, they were trying to do some real fancy thing about decanting everything. So compost was the only thing at the front. But with that, they created a number of other issues that by getting back to the basics and going, let's just give the can out, they were able to simplify that. And the last one on this is you're never too small to start and you're never too big to improve. Moving on to the next slide, what works no matter the scale. So we've talked about treating waste as a resource. So we can control the inputs so we know what we're dealing with at the end and how we can manage them as resources, not waste, as we've both touched on. Making a simple switch, you know, paper cups, cans, or reusables, and let's implement a plan to manage them like Simply Cups. Let's think about above and below the line, you know, what can and can't be seen. Both are required for success to take place. Let's plan with stakeholders in mind. Attendees interact with waste and equipment differently to operations, suppliers, and vendors. So let's keep that in mind while we're doing that. Let's get back to the basics. Think about if you can give that can to the attendee to avoid creating more waste. And if you have to decant, pour it into a reusable cup. Let's track our waste and create a baseline so that can help us make, you know, smart business decisions. And the last one is let's start small and let's improve fast. And again, you're never too small to start or too big to improve. So that's us from us. If you see something that applies to you, we'd love to talk to you. There's my email there and Brian's phone number and email. So thank you very much.
Great, Sam. I'll give you a virtual round of applause there. I love these sessions. I always learn something myself, and yeah, the Simply Cups really grabbed my attention, the urban planner in me in terms of that kind of reuse into material to product. And then I was just flicking through how it's turned into road bases and other transport initiatives. So, absolutely fascinating kind of the journey you've been on, but also kind of that interaction and path to reuse really stood out in terms of like your methodology and how you're interacting with your facilities, venues, and places and spaces. Just that simple messaging. So really appreciate the conversation, Sam and Brian. And from my perspective, we always like to open the floor to any of our guests on the webinar. If you have a burning question or comment, please feel free to use the chat or alternatively speak up by unmuting yourself. Don't worry about camera or anything. And while we've got the team here, can potentially some nuggets in terms of what works at your project or an event that's coming up on the cards. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to have a think about.
Hey, Adam, it's Luke Van Kempen here. How are you?
Oh, good. Well done. Thanks for jumping in, mate.
That's all right. Great presentation, guys, and yeah, some nice learnings to take from that. Just in terms of, I guess, there's a lot of communication of, the different sort of, waste options front of house that you've provided more visual examples of there. In terms of, I guess, promoting the sustainability efforts of your event, more publicly, outside, of at the event, maybe in the lead up to or post event, in terms of explaining some of the activities or initiatives that you've put in place with your event. Have you got any sort of tips or guidance on some things to look out for, or to watch out for when sort of doing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing I say is, and I always come back to, tell them what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you've done. And when you do that, people know what to expect when they're coming to the event. You do it at the event, and then you tell them what they did and congratulate them and thank them for it. Too often we see that, there is no pre or post comms about the initiatives and stuff that you're doing. And also, when people are turning up to the event, you haven't actually told them what to expect. So they're coming into it blind, and then they're going, "Oh, I didn't expect that. Oh, maybe if I had a know and a little tip or trick about how to interact with a certain bin, or what products might be or might not be on site." So, yeah, I think from my perspective, it's always getting back to, telling them the raw stuff. You can make it pretty like that iceberg, but realistically, you want to be sharing and showcasing all that stuff underneath beforehand. And if that's through, when they're buying tickets, or through EDMs or social media posts, and at the end, the same thing there. And again, it comes back to that reporting element. If you don't know what you're doing, you don't know your results. Sometimes it's a little bit like you're saying something without the evidence or things to back it up with. So, yeah, that's what I'd say. I'd say tell the story, tell it again, and if you're unsure if people have heard it, tell them one more time.
That's a great response, Sam. And I think, knowing Luke and the world that he works in the event space as well, and some of the insights that you showed in terms of how you can present what is coming at the event prior to, so you know what to bring, what you can avoid bringing. I think that really resonates to the participant and fan experience, that they're actually part of minimizing their impact as to what is going to occur on the grounds or at the spectation session which they're going to immerse themselves in. So I really like that idea of education, and that celebrating and giving those kind of case studies as to what has happened post-event. And that's why I think I was drawn to the Simply Cup early, in terms of that's just like a real fascinating thing, that elements can be turned into a product that could go to the next event in that series through your partnerships and collaborations. So thanks for that, Luke. Greatly appreciated. Do we have anyone else would like to pose a question? Feel free.
Yeah, I'll jump in and ask a question, if that's all right.
Perfect. Thank you, mate.
Just wondering a couple of things. How are they going in New Zealand with composting single-use cups there? I was down in Tassie recently, for instance, and compostable cups are actually accepted through their organics facilities. But then when you actually talk to the waste service providers, either their composting facilities were actually too full and they weren't able to accept more organic material, or they were actually considering them to be contamination. So just, curious how it is actually functioning in New Zealand, sort of a bit different to other parts of Australia as well.
Yeah, I was just about to say, if it was Australia, it'd be right up Brian's alley, but the question was raised to New Zealand. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Look, I think while I said before composting is a little bit easier here, it still has its challenges. And like, we're pretty thankful to be able to work with a couple of composters across the country. One in Auckland, which will still take a lot of compostable material, whether that's home compostable or commercially compostable. However, they have specific people that they accept it and don't accept it from. When we work with a few of the providers, as long as this composter knows it's from a closed loop, hand sorted event, they're happy to take it. It's when they accept it from other operators or people that are trying to do it themselves, where there can be either A, high levels of contamination, or B, they're allowing the wrong compostable products into the event. There's other composters that are a little bit more stricter, which is the rest of the country. There's a company we work with called Mainoki, which is the largest worm farm in the Southern Hemisphere, it's awesome to be able to see it. They have really strict protocols about what they can and can't take. So they will allow home compostable paper cups, So your aqueous lined or your aqueous based cup, but they won't take PLA, and they won't take things that are knowingly, PFAS added. So start with, they wouldn't be accepting bagasse or sugarcane or bamboo cane because it was knowingly PFAS added. But now with packaging manufacturers understanding the whole PFAS stuff, they're not knowingly adding it as much as more. Yes, there's still little traces of PFAS in it, but not at the levels that we used to be seeing. So there's a composter like Minoki that will now take the home compostable cups from us. They'll be able to take the bagasse, but only because we're implementing what can come into the event. We're telling the vendors and writing into their contracts, you have to use this type of packaging, you have to use this. And then at the events, we're looking at it and going, okay, you're not using the right thing. Can we quickly change that up? And if we can't, we're not going to say you can't trade. Some events will, but we won't say that. We'll just go, hey, look, we know exactly what that packaging looks like. We know where it's from. And when we see it, when we're sorting, it'll just get picked out and put to the general waste. Then there's another composter that's similar in Christchurch, and that falls underneath the Christchurch City Council guidelines, which is quite similar. There's products that they recommend and will say buy from this certain person, and then there's products that they'll say you can't buy this at all. So they've kind of gone one step further and gone, this manufacturer makes X, Y, and Z, you can get it. This manufacturer makes X, Y, and Z as well, you can get it. And this one makes A and B, and you can get those as well. So knowingly, it's that whole thing with managing the inputs to manage the outputs. We're working with and making sure that the only things that we can take out is what they're putting in. So yeah, composting is still tough, but when we're on site, there's low levels of contamination, so it does get accepted by these people. It is really tough because it's a composter will go, yeah, I'm happy to take it from you, but X, Y, and Z is making it harder. So we sometimes have to go through a process of reevaluating what we will accept and won't accept at events. And it's the same with the guys, our team in Oz, is they've adapted that packaging framework into the events over there, and they'll go to the promoters and to the venues and events and go, hey, look, can you please write into everyone's contracts that they have to abide by this? And so that they know the exact products that are getting used can be what's managed at the end. So sorry, hopefully that's answered your question, Liam. It was a little bit long-winded.
No, that's really awesome, and really happy to hear that there's some positive stuff happening in New Zealand with this. I'll follow it up with one question, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Have you had any luck in Victoria, in Australia, with getting compost facilities to accept any of the compostable products?
I can speak to that one, Sam, if you want. Not much in general. Obviously, New South Wales, it's completely impossible with the EPA. ACT is pretty much New South Wales, copies everything from there. Yeah, things open up a little bit when you go Victoria, Brisbane, and WA. We have success with one supplier in Vic, which is the same setup as Sam has mentioned over in New Zealand, where it's a arrangement because they know everything is touched by our staff. But as far as I know, and I mean, feel free to speak up, I'm pretty sure the Vic team are on the call. As far as I know, that's the only solution in Victoria currently, is if we're touching it, this supplier takes it. They are on the call, so feel free to put your hand up, Aaron/Jay, if you have further insight into that.
Yeah, I'm Jay. I'm one of the managers out in Victoria. Yeah, that's correct. We do have one facility that will actually accept compostable packaging as well as organic, provided it does come directly from us. At the moment, it is a little bit limited to a specific event because of the volume that comes from that event, not necessarily every single event that we have. We are looking to expand that and organizing additional drop-offs. But again, it will be very much a case of they have that relationship with us. They know that when we're on site, we are sorting every single bag that comes through. So anything that they can get is actually 100% compostable by their standards. And we constantly check in with them to make sure that if there's anything additional that pops up, we can adjust what we can and can't bring. That then informs our vendor packaging framework for each event, and we know what's going on. I know that we do push it a little bit further out in ACT as well with one of our larger events, we actually go so far as to audit the vendors that come in the first week of the event, just so we can understand that they've said they're going to bring a certain item, and if it's not matching that item, we ask them to bring it back to the specific packaging that they said they were going to be using, so that way we can ensure that as much of that packaging is captured and recycled as we possibly can.
Thanks, Jay. It's good to have the Vic team to just jump in for stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, short answer is it's complicated everywhere and it's ever changing and very hard to keep track of it. And yeah, it's not even just on a state basis. It can be a provider or a local council basis sometimes too for that sort of stuff.
No, great to you've had some success in the space. Well done.
Yeah, we try and keep up with
Thanks,
what's going on across both countries. So yeah, again, drop us a note if you do have any further questions on it.
I appreciate that question, Liam. It's good discussion. The organics, I think, is popping up a lot, particularly in the larger stadia kind of world. And I did a walk around with Liam at Marvel and MCG and saw firsthand the challenges organizations at their scale have with that challenge at hand. I just wanted to, before anyone else jumps in with a question, I just wanted to talk either Sam or Brian about kind of starting your journey. Like a lot of our feedback we get is we don't know where to start, or kind of like what are the processes which a closed loop, for example, might help a newly formed event. You talk about scale from the small community events through to the large mass participations. Did you want to share a bit more about Closed Loop's future plans and thinking of how we can help in more that strategic consulting space also, and go along that journey? Just to give that insight that there's kind of two parts to the challenges. There's the implementation operational side, but there's the kickoff stage as to how do we get to that point. I just didn't know if you had any observations on that from your shoes there, if you don't mind.
I can start with that as the first step in all of these things is just getting information. It's not about diverting from landfill. It's not about actually solving the issue. It's just seeing what's used on site, the volumes, and where it's currently going. So like I spoke about at the very beginning about the cups, it's literally just seeing what's happening, seeing that that's a problem, witnessing the amount of volume of stuff that's ending up in landfill because it's all just ending up on the road after an aid station and getting picked up in street sweepers and disappearing. That's the first step. So whatever level of auditing, assessment, anything that can be done to get that picture of what's going on is always the first step. And then it's time to look at these solutions. I don't know if Sam has anything to add to that.
Yeah, yeah, really great question, and I get asked it quite often, especially with New Zealand being, there's a variety of people that are, grassroots that are starting up, or the big players. But I think the thing that I come back to, which Brian kind of touched on, is getting that baseline. Yes, understanding, what they're producing and how many attendees and stuff like that. But then it's kind of talking to us and going, hey, can you just come in and have a look at the event? Getting a baseline, understanding, how much waste is being generated, and then go, cool, now that we've got this baseline, what can we actually do to support and help you? And quite often, like even without us, you can try and get your own baseline. That's, talking to your waste company that's coming to pick up your bins or your waste. Legally they have to get dockets and understand how much volume and weight of these waste and where they're going. So ask those questions and demand that they come back to you with that information. I think that's a really good starting point. Coming back to like the whole consultancy part of it, yeah, we are going to be launching, imminently, and I know that she's on the call, Lisa, our consultancy arm of our business. So for those people that are outside of what we're doing in site services and venues and events and the practical implementation of it, but if you're after that consultancy side of it, from a high level business point of view, Closed Loop also has great consultants within our team that can help out with that and get you on track and build out some really cool stuff.
Oh, perfect. And I think the only reason I asked that is that C is a not-for-profit and we want to support our members, and there's lots of grants and funding opportunities either at local government level through to state government with EPA and other worlds that we can support members and industry organizations kind of find those projects and test those cases and work with groups like partners such as Closed Loop, kind of find those first challenges to move forward to solutions. So I think it's just really important that no matter in who's listening to this, in what kind of position you are, or what shoes you're wearing or hat in your business, there is an element, and you can start, and it could be simple by gathering the information and working through the process and on that journey. I've probably got time for one more question. Don't be shy if that's enough for today, and we can close up soon. But if anyone's got one burning final comment or question, please feel free to put in the chat, or unmute yourself and dial up there. Just give you a couple more seconds. No, all good and perfect. So I'd just like to thank Sam and Brian and the Closed Loop team in particular. From a Sports Environment Alliance perspective, they've been fantastic supporters of Sports Environment Alliance from 2025. And I'm very grateful for the expertise and thought and leadership they're bringing into the community, of which we're trying to build stronger and stronger to give the tools and resources to really turn the dial in this space. I know we've got a lot of partners on the line and organizations that collaborate with the team. So I just love that this is just building more and more into a collective. And please feel free to reach out to Sam and Brian or any of the Closed Loop team. And really grateful for everyone giving up their time. It's very busy.